thank you very much for coming along to what is our third property session that we've done. We've done several of these and in response to quite a few landlords sort of wanted to know sort of what's going on in the market, what's actually happening in terms of lettings and property management really. So just to introduce myself, I'm actually Debbie Franklin. I'm the area manager for Andrews for letting and management, and I've worked for the company for 23 years in various guises through the business. I've done a bit of everything in my time and been a property manager as well for 2 years. This is my colleague Stacey Joyner, and she's our mortgage services lady. So I'm going to be talking through some of the slides, and then Stacey's going to be talking through giving an overview of what's happening and the latest deals on the buy-to-let mortgage side of the business as well. This particular session is all about property management and what goes into that, and sort of dispelling some of the myths that landlords may have as to what property management is all about. So I'm going to take you through this. And just for those people who don't know much about Andrews or haven't come to one of these before, Andrews have been around for 68 years, and we're actually owned by 3 charitable trusts, so quite an unusual ownership. And we are one of the country's leading property specialists. We've got 80 branches, estate agency and lettings covering South East and South West. And we have, in terms that we cover lots of different aspects of all property, but we have a specialist estate agency side of the business, mortgage side and letting. So we all do our own and specialise in our own part. About Andrews Letting and Management, very pleased to say, as you can see from the stats on the screen, we let over 7,500 properties last year, so quite a phenomenal amount, and so that gives us a lot of experience that we can draw on and give you sort of particular examples and things. We also very pleased and quite proud actually that we were the bronze winner of the largest UK letting agency, which is actually an awards that are run by the Times and Sunday Times, so they're quite prestigious awards. And we're also members of ALA, which is the Association of Residential Letting Agents. For those of you who may know, letting in agency business is actually an unregulated industry, unlike a state agency. So anybody can set up as a letting agent, but those people that want to do it properly and things are members of the trade body ALA. We were actually co-founder members of that, so we want to make sure that what we do and how we do things is done professionally and with the right experience and knowledge. We're also members of the TPO, which is the Property Ombudsman as well. So we abide by all their rules and regulations that affect us operating day to day. So sort of really anybody that has come to any of our sessions before, we had a bit of a theme of the 4 Ps in property, and that's about getting the right tenant, or having the right property basically, sourcing the right property, getting a quality tenant for your property, and then making sure so you've got the right protection in place. So that protection might be inventories, it might be legal protection, the right insurance is on your property as well. And then the planning, so sort of planning for the future and also planning in terms of an investment and looking after your investment and maximising the yield on that particular property, and that can be through the mortgage rates or also expanding your portfolio perhaps for the future. And those 4 sort of Ps really do apply to property management as well. It's sort of a theme that runs through. On the screen here, you've got 6 things that in our research and from our experience and talking to landlords, there's 6 things that people, very often we find that landlords are most concerned about. And you know, there's various different things there as you can see, but the 2 main things that I think very often time and time again that come up are concerning rent arrears, how you handle those, how they happen, that type of thing, or how to minimise them in the first place. And also void periods, how to minimise your void periods as well. So all of these things we'll hopefully be able to demonstrate to you tonight as to how you can avoid those things, you know, and not have to worry about them as well through having sort of property management. What I wanted to do is sort of understand the importance of exactly what property management is. And really, property management is not the management of an entire building. When I say an entire building, I mean, when I'm referring there, is sort of referring to perhaps where you've got a block of flats. So if you own one flat in a building, letting and property management agent is not there to manage the whole block. They're there to manage your interest of that flat within that block. What that's typically known as, where you've actually got somebody managing a block, that's actually the maintenance of that and the communal areas and maintaining a management fund. And that's typically known as asset or block or leasehold management. We do actually have a leasehold management side of the business. So if anybody was in a block and dissatisfied with their particular agent, or maybe you're trying to run it yourselves as owners of the flats, we can advise, and we have a separate business that actually deals with that, and they manage lots of I think it's about 3,000 units around Bristol, Cheltenham and Oxfordshire as well, and some up in London. What property management is that we do is the day-to-day management of an individual property or portfolio of properties for landlords, so flats, houses, and that includes the rent collection, the repairs, the maintenance, and maintaining a good tenant relationship as well. The main thing here is property management frees you up as the landlord from actually managing it day to day. So what that does is very much means you don't have the face-to-face or phone contact with a tenant. They come through the agent, and we're the independent third party. We're there representing your interests and always making sure that as the client, you're the people that we look after. But it's maintaining that relationship with the tenant as well. Because if you've got a happy tenant, then usually you've got happy landlords as well. Then really what we've said here is the consequences of bad property management. And often we do hear this because of the fact that in my capacity I'm actually also the Arla regional rep for all the agents in Bristol, Bath, North East Somerset, Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, a bit of everywhere actually. I hear of lots of instances where agents, good reputable agents, have taken over properties from other agents, or maybe a landlord that's been trying to do it themselves and have got themselves into a sticky situation. And when we say bad property management, what we mean by that is really unresponsive, reactive and slow. So I don't think anybody sets out to badly manage their property, but perhaps through lack of knowledge and things or experience, they get into situations that are not quite sure how to get themselves out of. And usually what you tend to find, the consequences of it, there's lots of different things as you can see there, but very often a poorly maintained property will normally mean that over a period of time it will deteriorate, and that will mean that effectively you'll very often get a lower rental. It won't be so attractive to people when they're looking on Rightmove and Zoopla, all the big property portfolios. And that means that actually you're not standing out from the crowd from all the other properties that are around. If you're getting lower rentals over that period of time, obviously that's not looking after your investment either. Effectively, if you're also then the repairs and maintenance are not being dealt with as quickly as a tenant would expect, then you're going to get a dissatisfied tenant. And if there are dissatisfied tenants, what you tend to find is they turn around very quickly. They'll only stay for 6 months. We do know that very often when tenants, a lot of tenants are in the, as you may know and you've heard in the papers or seen in the papers, we are in a generation of rent. It's called generation rent, is a new term that's sort of sprung up in the media. And lots of people are renting for quite a number of years. And therefore, if they've been unhappy in a property, they're more likely to move out. And that means you're going to get shorter term tenancy agreements and more chance of higher void periods as well. And that's not something that I'm sure that you want to have happen, because then that's not protecting your investment and earning you a good yield on the property. One of the things we have, and quite often examples of where we've taken properties from another, landlords come to us and we've had problems, and I'm just going to sort of ask Ellie to give an example of something where it's actually happened. And Ellie's the branch manager of our Bishopston office, and she's just going to give you an example of something that they've experienced more recently, and that would best demonstrate where it can sometimes go wrong and people just don't know really. So
no, we had a landlord who called and asked us to go and see some of his properties. He was a little bit concerned about perhaps the mismanagement of them. We went along and saw the properties with the landlord, and the state of the properties was it was horrific. He has 6 properties. We've now taken over management of those. We've taken over, and in 6 months we've had to do £35,000 worth of repairs on those properties, where repairs weren't being reported by tenants, the properties weren't being inspected by him or his agent. There was minor issues that have then become major issues. We have a bathroom. There was a very slight leak in the waste underneath the bath, and where it's dripped and dripped and dripped and nothing's ever been reported. All of the floorboards are rotten, the floorboards have got to come up, the bathroom's got to come out, the ceilings have got to come down. So it's quite things that are very, very simple, that if you're managing your property effectively, doing inspections, checking them, making sure you're picking up on maintenance that tenants aren't noticing or aren't reporting, these things can be really, really easily avoided, but they can turn into, from very minor things, into very, very major issues.
Mm. So thank you, Ellie. It just sort of demonstrates, I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but that is a real life example, and that the reason there was so much money on that one, he'd actually, in that particular case, the landlord had actually also entrusted the agent to sort out an extension to the back of the building of the property, which wasn't overseen and properly project managed. If we do something like that, we would use a surveyor to actually oversee the tender of that and oversee the project of works, because that's quite a specialist thing, but we can manage that type of thing. It wasn't done properly, and consequently the build was, when we went to the property, we found that there was a huge, the extension wasn't built properly. It was actually falling away from the back of the building, and there was cracks this wide in the back of the building, so it actually had to be pulled down and actually rebuilt again. So that was sort of one of the reasons why he's actually had quite an expensive thing. That is quite extreme, but we do have lots of other small things where it does, you know, things materialise. Quite often some tenants don't actually always report things. They're supposed to, but they don't always. By having regular inspections on a property, quarterly inspections that a good managing agent should do for you, that will hopefully find those things before they get too bad and before you have to deal and become extremely expensive. The advantages of good property management is that you're going to, you're going to get less arrears. One of the things, any good property management agent, and we have dedicated property managers who daily we get rent arrears statements that they will pull every day on the whole portfolio to see at what stage anybody's in any arrears. And the moment something goes into, if it's sort of 1 or 2 days, that depends on maybe if it's been a weekend and their standing order was due to come out on a Saturday. Obviously it's not going to come out onto a Monday because banking is only Monday to Friday still. So we wouldn't chase something like that. But if it starts tipping over into a few more days, then we would be on to that very, very quickly and trying to engage with the tenant to find out what the problem is. If they've just moved in, it could be the standing order hasn't been set up correctly by the bank or something. So, but it's getting on top of that very, very quickly, and also engaging with you as the landlord and keeping you communicated with so that you know what's going on and you can make decisions. With that process, if there was ongoing, and it's actually ascertaining very quickly as we possibly can, as the separating the can't pays and the won't pays. And what I mean by that is, very few people just sit in a property and just don't pay. The reason they might do that is because maybe a landlord actually hasn't done repairs, so they're trying to withhold rent to force an issue. But that's quite rare. I think it's about the fact of actually ascertaining, because sometimes things do happen. You may, if you let to a group of sharers and one of them decides to move out and just ups and goes, sometimes that does happen, then the others may not, even though they're responsible for paying for the rest of the house, they may not be able to afford it. Or you may have a situation where somebody loses their job, and financially, if somebody can't afford to pay to stay in the property, our recommendation would be along the lines of trying to negotiate an early termination of a tenancy agreement, for example, because there's no point in keeping somebody to a tenancy. Even if they've signed for 12 months, for example, and after 6 months lose their job, you wouldn't want to actually say, well, you've got to stay for your 12 months if you're not going to get the rent. You're better off having your property back and actually getting rent and re-renting it out. And we would negotiate an end of tenancy with that tenancy and do it properly so it's all legal. Then those people can move out and we can re-let it and move new people in. Or if somebody's just maybe lost, it's just a short-term hiccup because somebody may have lost a job but they've got a new job, so maybe it's between jobs and it's the payment thing, we can set up payment plans as well. But the main thing we will be doing is we'll be hitting people with 7-day, 14, 21-day letters if they're not paying, so that if in the worst case scenario you had to take legal action to evict somebody, all the proper procedures are in place so that you can get to that end result as quickly as possible and regain possession on your property. I'm very pleased to say that actually we have a very good record on rent arrears in the fact that we don't have too many of them, and very, very few of them actually go past a 2-month period because we're very good at managing that process and keeping on top of it. So that's just one of the ways that a good managing agent should be able to do that sort of for you. The main thing is as well, is the good property management is about being responsive, is about being proactive, and by doing these things and keeping the property maintained and liaising with the tenant to let them know what the landlord's going to do. And it is your obligation as a landlord to keep, repairing that property. And even if somebody unfortunately doesn't pay rent, you still have to repair the property. You still have to act and make sure all the services like heating, lighting and things like that are done, or showers if they stop working. If they rent a property with a shower, they have to expect a working shower. So it's about using, making sure that those things are done quickly. If you do that, the chances are that people are more likely to stay longer. What the Arla reviews, the quarterly reviews that they do on the sort of what's happening in the market are actually show that the average tenancy agreement or a length of time that somebody actually stays in an average property is around about 19 months. So it's actually quite a long time. So, and the chances are they're more likely to stay in that property for that length of period if you as a landlord actually keep your property up together and things are acted upon very quickly. So, and at the end of the day, if you do all of these things, you're going to get a satisfied tenant. That's going to give you less stress and hassle, which and most landlords really what they want is less stress and hassle, I'm sure, and your money in your bank on time every month as well. So, and the main thing as well is with good property management, hopefully, if your property, the end result of this, if you're maintaining your property on a regular basis and investing in it, it's going to increase its property value. It's going to keep pace with everything else that's on the market around you. So if any time you come to put that property on the market for sale, then you're actually realising all of the capital in that property rather than actually selling it and you're having to take a hit because it's not in very good condition. One of the things I can say is, and what it can do if you're looking to invest further, obviously if you're increasing the equity in your property, you could look, if you want to invest and expand your portfolio, you could then do that. And there's ways and means of doing that, which Stacey will be able to tell you about a little bit later. But I've got an example of a particular landlord that I took his first property on, I think about 15, 16 years ago. He was a landlord that was actually renting his own property out and going abroad, working for about 10 years. He rented his first property out and over that time got more confident about what he was doing, and we managed it because he was going abroad. We looked after it for him. And eventually he actually started to buy other properties, and over that period of time, up until this year, he's built amassed 8 properties into his portfolio. Now, as a landlord, he's always bought good properties, the right properties, always taken advice from us as to actually where to buy these properties, and some of them he's bought whilst he was over in Hong Kong, and we used to go and look at properties for him and give recommendations on ones that things that he might like to consider buying and ones that he wouldn't. And he's used that advice, and he's built up a good portfolio of properties, which then sort of spread his risk in terms of quite a variety of different properties. But he's always maintained those, and he's always set into his whole plan of having a rolling maintenance program on those. So we will always proactively be saying to him, look, this property's coming up, it's been let for 2-3 years, you might need to be thinking about decorating this. So we could then proactively book in a program of work so that when a tenancy came to an end, we leave a slightly longer period of it being empty to get the works done, ready for remarketing for the next tenant that comes along. And one of the things that he's found is he's had quite a lot of long-term tenants in his properties because he's always quick to react and deal with the maintenance as in when it happens as well, for the things that do happen. And actually he's looking to buy another 2 this year as well, so which is great. Responsive property management is the key to actually having, you know, less stress and hassle really. But you do have a choice, and you know, one of the things you can do is you can either do it yourself, and those landlords that maybe you've been doing this for quite a long time, you're quite confident about doing that. But also there's some people who might be new into the market, you might be thinking about investing, or maybe you've had a bad experience and you're not quite sure what to do. What you can do is think about maybe using an agent like ourselves to actually do that. But if you do it yourself and you're just setting out, what I would say, it isn't easy, and that's why, you know, we do what we do. One of the things is expectations of tenants now are extremely high. I will say that they're getting fussier and fussier about the type of properties they're looking for. They're very well informed, because obviously in the time that I've been working for Andrews for 23 years, and in that time I've seen the rental market change so much. But one of the biggest things that has been the change in technology. So tenants can find out anything. And one of the things they do is quite often quote. They go and find, and they Google, because you can Google anything nowadays, can't you? You can find a YouTube video for, you can probably find a YouTube video to let property, but you can find anything out. And so they're very well informed. So they know what their rights are. They know, and they know also about the type of tenant, the properties that they're looking for. So, and the thing is also the law sets out some very exacting standards for you as a landlord of things that you need to adhere to. And there have been lots and lots of regulation changes, and there's more coming in the future as well. And any good agent, letting agent and a property management agent should be able to keep you up to speed with those types of things. Just in the last couple of years, we'd had HMO, which is houses of multiple occupation. You've got the gas safety regulations, and even that, just more recently, that's actually changed. The gas safety just recently has affected any rented property. One of the things, you have to have inspection hatches for anything, any fluid appliances. That has been a major problem in flats where you're then having to liaise with the whole building, because these hatches have to go up through the floors. So even though you've got one flat in one part of the building and the flat above might be owner occupied, they have to know that the flue, not just at that point in that flat, but that flue that goes all the way up through the building is sound. And the only way to do that is have inspection hatches built in. So anything built older than about probably the last 5 or 8 years or so, find that that's not the case. So that affects lots of older property, or even properties that were converted some years ago. The main thing is also you know, the private rented sector is growing, and Stacey will back this up in some of the stats that she gives at the moment, is there are 3.8 million households in the private rented sector in the UK. So, and it's growing further. Buy-to-let, it sort of loans, sort of people taking the buy-to-let loans in the last year have increased quite significantly. And the thing is as well, is the private letting industry, if you've read anything in the newspapers more recently, or on any social media sites or news and things like that, it's becoming increasingly under the microscope of various different watchdogs. Shelter are pushing very hard. They've sort of bagged the word rogue landlord. That gets bounded around in lots and lots of things, and I'm sure, you know, that there are only a small minority of people out there that aren't good landlords, but they are out there, and unfortunately they tar everybody with a bit of the same brush, I'm afraid, and some of the regulations aren't necessarily always thought through as best that they could be, but we have to deal with them once they're put in place. Which also is, you know, pushing for a tighter regulation, firstly of letting agents, but also possibly of landlords as well in the future. So it's something that, again, these are all things that we can advise you on and let you know that if a regulation changes, good letting agents should be able to inform you very quickly of what the impact that you might have to do as a landlord as well. And one of the things that I allude to here is, when you say technology, social media. Bad landlords very quickly tenants can tell a lot of people now, whereas before they might just told a couple of friends over a pint in the local pub. Now they can go on social media and they can tweet it, they can Facebook it, they can go on review sites. So we might have a trip advisor of a landlord advisor one day, don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't on the horizon. In the reverse, maybe we go one for tenants as well. So but it's just pointing out that it isn't easy. So if you are new or are thinking of entering the market, whilst it sounds scary, we can, you know, any good letting agent and all the people in the room can guide you through these processes. If you do it yourself, you're gonna have you got the time and have you got the knowledge and the expertise to do it. And fine, if you've been doing it for quite a while, you probably have built up that over a period of time, but it's always becoming, ensuring that you're keeping up to date. So as a landlord, are you keeping up to date? Are you a member maybe of the National Landlords Association? Where are you getting your information from? Or is your agent giving you that information? Because if they're not, these regulations, and there are more on the horizon. One of the things that's coming into play is, if anybody's read in the papers recently, there's talk of landlords actually having to check immigration status of their tenants. Now, we do that as an agent already. Some agents don't, but we actually do that, and we've been doing that for quite a while. But it's even quite difficult for us to be able to do that as much as we possibly can. We check visas and things like that. But it's quite complicated even for us, and we know what we're looking for. But for landlords, if you're going to be expected to do that in the future, you've got to make sure, because there can be consequences back for the landlord as well. The the time side of things, if the little amount of money that it might cost you to sort of have a property managed, it might free up for you to have those holidays and have that time off. Because the thing is, tenants do want to be able to contact somebody quite quickly. What I can say is quite often as well, we do have quite a lot of tenants who come into us, and more they're asking for not written references on the landlord, but they do ask, what is this landlord like for repairs and maintenance? Because if they've been renting for a period of time, maybe they've had a bad experience. So they're getting fussier about the landlords that they will consider. And some people will say, are you managing it as the agent? Because if you're managing it as the agent, we know we can deal with a third party. So that makes them often feel more comfortable as well. And again, like I say, it's the knowledge. Have you got the knowledge and keeping up to date with all the technicalities that go on? And, you know, it's having things like good inventories, check-ins, check-outs, that type of thing. So all of those things, and knowing what your legal obligations are. So there's lots of different things on there. We will be able to send you a link. We'll post a link for these slides, so you don't have to, you know, sort of remember all of this. And just letting you know what laws are out there and what affect landlords. First of all, you've got two. You've got civil law and you've got criminal law. And these are all of the things that currently will affect a landlord, or could at any one time. A couple of different ones there. You've got the Landlord and Tenant Act 1987, which is that one is about service of the correct notice on tenants, to let them know where they can serve notice and where they can pay their rent. It's making sure that you're doing that one correctly. You've got the Equality Act. When you're renting the property out, you have to make sure that you're not discriminating against anybody in terms of that. So those are all things that we're mindful of when we're renting a property out. So lots of different things there, and we can give you more advice on individual laws. If you break any of these civil laws, the worst that you get is a fine, okay? However, the more serious ones are these ones. This is criminal law. And what it says is, if you break one of these and you get found out and you get prosecuted, you actually get a criminal record as a landlord. Quite a sobering thought, really. But there's fines, unlimited fines on some of these. Criminal record at the worst case scenario for something extremely serious, and it's got to be pretty serious, but there is even imprisonment of some landlords, and that has happened, especially around the gas safety one more than anything. You know, and you have to be pretty non-compliant landlord and be pretty negligent not to have done it, but I have seen that, and because the worst case scenario with gas safety regulations is, the worst case scenario is that somebody actually dies and you can actually get done not just under the gas safety regulation, you can actually get done for manslaughter as well. So if you've been particularly negligent. So it's quite and gas safety is, you know, in all of Andrews, every member of staff knows if you've got a property and somebody wants to move in and we haven't got the gas safety, they don't move in. It's as simple as that. They just don't move in. That's just doesn't happen. You know, with promises, oh, we're going to get that into you. No, Mr. Landlord, if you don't give us a gas safety certificate or you allow us to get it sorted, your tenant can't move in. It's because my staff would lose their job, and worst case scenario, if something happened, my director goes to prison. So you won't be very happy either. But there's lots of things here. One of the ones that's one I'll draw your attention to is the electrical equipment safety regulation. It's been in force since 1994. Quite an old, you know, that's 20 years really. It's affecting, you might have heard it, it's otherwise known as PAT testing, which is portable appliance testing. This is one that still a lot of landlords and even agents, I dare say it, and I don't think all are agents, but some agents that are out there actually say, oh, you don't have to worry about that one. When they wrote the regulations for gas safety, they made it very clear you have to have a test every year. When they wrote the regulations for the electrical safety thing, what they said is they didn't say it's specific, you have to have a test and you have to have a form. But what they did say is you have to prove it's safe. The only way in a court of law, if you were stood up in front of a judge, because a lot of people say, oh no, you don't have to have that, don't worry, you know, you don't have to have that tested. The only way you can ever prove anything safe in front of a judge in a court of law, if your tenant got electrocuted, you know, and worst case scenario died, the judge is going to say, how do you know it's safe? Well, I know it's safe. Are you a qualified electrician? No, I'm not. Okay, what's your defence? You've got no defence, basically. Your insurance will probably be null and void on your house as well, because most landlord insurances say, are you compliant with all the regulations of gas safety, electrical, etc. If you haven't, the chances are your insurance is, it won't pay out in the worst case scenario of a fire which was caused by electrical fault. And I have seen that happen, because insurance will do anything they can to wriggle out of paying something, and if they can find a way out of that, they'll ask for your certificate that shows that things have been tested on a regular basis. So it's things like that again, we make sure that people do have those things. So there's lots of different ones there, and like I say, got the immigration one that's possibly going to hit us, and maybe some others as well, and sometimes with change of governments we always get different things. If you do decide that you want to choose a managing agent, you know, what are the things to look for, and the things to ask them. So the things that you want to be maybe thinking about is, do they provide an inventory service and a check-in and check-out? One of the things, and actually, is that an independent one? One of the things we tend to find is some people quite often do that as an inclusive fee, and then they do it themselves. The agent will whip round in half an hour and do an inventory for you. One of the things that we do is we actually outsource our inventories and checkouts to an independent company who specialise that, because average 3-bedroom house, unfurnished, could run into 13 to 15 plus pages, including photographs, with a lot of detail in it. Because the deposit regulations have come into play, and as you know, tenants, your deposits have to be protected, and the tenants now, if they turn around and say that I'm not paying those, you know, what you're saying, that I've damaged in that property, unless as a landlord you've got proof of what it was like before they moved in, you might as well not even take a deposit. You might as well forget taking a deposit. It's not worth the piece of paper it's written on if you don't have a good inventory and a check-in and check-out. And those are all things that an agent should be able to supply you. So even if actually you don't go with a full management service, but perhaps you want the agent to do the letting for you, maybe you might consider whether, and one of the things we do is we can do optional extras. So if you just want let only, but you want an inventory check-in and check-out, we can organise that for you as well. So there's lots of things that people can do. Thing you want to think about is how many properties do they manage, because have they got the amount of staff to do that? On average in our business, our property managers manage no more than about 140 properties per property manager. And when I say that, we have dedicated property managers. So we don't have staff that are trying to run around, let a property, deal with somebody signing and moving in and then trying to deal with the leaky roof. We actually have people negotiators that go out and let the properties, and then dedicated property managers that deal with you as the landlord and sorting out the repairs, maintenance, and dealing with the checkouts and things as well. And what's their maintenance programme? How do they do it? What's their rolling programmes and things? And what's their record on rent arrears? Like I say, we have a lower than national average on sort of rent arrears, so I'm very pleased to say. And how do they manage disputes? You know, we train our staff and we get the people in from the deposit side of things, the adjudicators, and train our staff on how to present if we have to have a dispute, we present that information the best way possible to enable you as the landlord to be able to make a claim on that deposit if it's a rightful claim. And are the staff qualified and experienced? Our staff, a majority of our staff are either qualified already or newer staff working their way through to the qualifications, called MFOP, which is the National Federation of Property Professionals, and that's an industry recognised qualifications of technical awards and diplomas. If you do decide that you want to use an agent, we can help. And like I say, we've got over 68 years experience. We're members of My Deposit, so that's where we adhere to their sort of things, and members of the Property Ombudsman as well. And just a couple of things, you know, like I say, our void periods are lower, 60% lower than the national average as well, because one of the things we know is that as a landlord, that is a concern that you do have. So it's about turning your property around as quickly as you possibly can. We like to leave a couple of days in between one tenancy ending and one tenancy beginning. Reason being, if the worst case scenario, obviously we've been going in and doing some viewings, but if, for an example, the tenant's moved out and haven't left it in a clean condition, we don't want one tenant moving out on, which sometimes happens, where a landlord and agent has said, right, one moves out in the morning and one moves out and moves in the afternoon. Where's your cleaning time? Where's your time to do any repairs and maintenance or any unexpected things that perhaps they've hidden with a rug or something like that? You know, those things are very important to get done, because then you're setting the right example to the new tenants that come in, and the better example you can set as a landlord and the condition the property's in, the better chance. It's about that first impression, because you never get the second chance to make it. So. And lots of things. We handle rent arrears, like I say. We supervise contractors. One of the things to look out for as well. A lot of some agents, sometimes I have heard, and we don't do this, but they will add with the contractors. They add an extra percentage on the contractor's bill. We don't actually do that. So we instruct the contractors for you, and they pay, and we can handle all the payments from your rent accounts. But you will get copies of those invoices, and that's what they invoice. It's come through your account, so you know we can do all of that, and you pay what you see on that invoice and things. So we do that, and we develop a great relationship between you and your tenants as well. So one of the things we will also do for you is organise rent reviews. What we do is on an annual basis, or when a property is due up for an extension, rent review, and look at what the market's happening at the moment, and advise you as a landlord what you could do with your rental in terms of whether you could put it up, worst case scenario put it down, because sometimes you might have to adjust it sometimes in the market if it came back on for reletting. Maybe there was too much choice around. But we would do that, and we would negotiate those rent sort of any increases and things with tenants for you on your behalf for further extensions as well. And also we do quarterly inspections, and this is not somebody just quickly opening the door, looking in and going, oh yeah, everything's fine. It's actually somebody going in, doing a written report and making sure that the property is in as good a condition as possible. It's not a check against the inventory, because you can't do that in the mid-term. But what it is making sure that are the tenants are keeping it in good condition? Are there any repairs and maintenance the tenant hasn't reported that are quite obvious? And feeding that back to you, so you've got a bit of a picture as well. So all of those things. If you like the sound of all of that, you can give us a try. And if you're considering, you know, maybe a landlord that's just doing let only at the moment, and you're thinking, is it worth it? Well, we say try us out. And one of the things that we would do is, if you do a 12 months full management, you get it for the price of 9. So we do 3 months off. On your, so it is free. So from that point of view, and that's if you instruct us before the end of May. So there's a little bit of time as well. And that's on, even if you've got an existing property with us that you just let already, but it's not managed, then if you decide that, because you can also mid-term, these properties that Ellie was talking about, we actually took those over mid-term tenancy agreements because the landlord was dissatisfied with the service he was getting from his agent and he wasn't getting the money through either. So he instructed us and we took them over mid-term. So we can do that as well, or you can step up the service mid-term as well. So it's not a problem if you're an existing landlord. Just in summary then, really the golden rule to protecting your buy-to-let property investment and sort of the property management is the 4 Ps. And the fifth one is going to give you peace of mind, really. And just to say, we don't just let properties. We have, like I say, we've got all aspects of the business. We've got a estate agency, the mortgage services. We've got a surveying side of the business as well. So if you've got a property that you need surveyor advice on, or maybe that, you know, sort of extending works and things like that, we've got conveyancing. We've got a property services company that does asset management for people around the country, and leasehold management and land in new homes as well. So we can advise if you've got plots of land, we can advise on how you can maximise out of that. Any questions? Because now you've sort of listened to us for all evening. Has anybody got any questions, or have we bamboozled you with lots of information? Anybody like to ask a question? Yes.
I'd welcome any more stats you had on the market for buy-to-lets.
Right.
You gave an overall one, but it's really national. Is there anything you could give more regional? How many there are, for example? How quickly it's growing? etc.
How many there are? It's quite difficult to get stats in terms of actually exactly how many buy-to-let properties there are. What I can tell you, just in Bristol itself, the private rented sector equates to, it's around about 18% of all households. And that's expected to rise quite considerably and go up to around the 24% by about 2019, I think it is. So it's quite a rising market, but there is the demand there. How's it growing? I mean, it is continually growing. In terms of actually the market in general, house building has been, in terms of house sales, as you know, the selling market is taking off and quite considerably at the moment, and the sales guys will tell you that property stock is in short supply, so that is pushing up prices a bit. Will that affect the rental market? No, I don't think it will, because all the signs are that we are moving a bit more towards a European model, that more and more people see renting as a credible alternative. So lots of people will rent for lots of different reasons. So even some tenants that actually are tenants may own a property somewhere anyway. There's lots of people, there's lots of single people around. So a lot of people, unfortunately, lots of divorces. That creates one may stay in a marital home and one goes and rents. And also you've got economic mobility as well. So a lot of people moving wherever that there are jobs, and rentals give them that freedom to do that as well. So they may keep a property that they rent out themselves, but they might rent moving around. So it's not all, if you read any industry things or any big surveys, the actual rented market is expected to still grow. It's not expected to retract at all, because there's lots of different reasons for that. But basically, it's not expected, and we're not seeing it. We're seeing a little bit of a slow. You know, we are seeing an exodus a little bit of some tenants that have been in there long term and now maybe been saving up for a deposit. So some people are moving out, but there's plenty of people to replace them. On average, at the moment, just in Bristol, we've got 9 applicants to every 1 property. And that can vary. In Bishopston around here, it rises to about 14 applicants to every 1 property. So different areas will have different things, but on average it's about 9 to 1.
And average yields at the moment?
Average yields, round about, in Bristol, it's anything between 4.7 to 5.2. So around that sort of price. And again, it will vary on there'll be little pockets of different yields, really. But some of the properties that we've given to you, if you got when you came in, if you haven't, we've got some investor sheets that do show some of the particular yields on some properties dotted all around Bristol as well. Yeah. Any other questions?
Multiple occupancy homes, I think you've got to be registered.
Yeah.
Are there any moves afoot to make all landlords registered?
There is talk, and various councils are trying. Well, there's lots of different things, because you've got government legislation and that, but local authorities. I work quite closely with Bristol City Council. Actually, I sit on their Homes for Bristol board because as being a big city, they've got a housing strategy, and they've actually asked me to help be an advisor on the private rented sector, to let them know about things that they might do and how that would impact. I will be honest, Bristol City take a reasonable approach to working with private landlords. It may not seem that sometimes, but I can tell you they take a better approach than Bath, for example. Bath spread out Article 4, which enables councils to have powers to decide as to how many, where properties will be rented and sort of spread in particular areas. And basically in Bath, they actually just Article 4'd virtually the whole of Bath, which has caused a lot of problems, because you've got to apply, if you're going to rent a property, to groups of sharers rather than families. Well, groups of sharers or things make up a larger proportion of the rental market than families often do. In Bristol, they've only used Article 4 in certain areas, and the reason that Article 4 was there is to bring up the quality of property. That was the intention, is to bring up the quality of property and force those bad landlords or rogue landlords to bring up the standard of their accommodation. And where Bristol did it, they actually did it mostly around the Stapleton Road area, because they recognised there was a really bad, that's where their worst proportion of all their complaints with properties and the standard of property being bad coming out. So they did it there. There's not plans at the moment to actually bring that further forward. They're talking about accreditation in the council in Bristol, about accrediting landlords, but it'd be a voluntary scheme. But they know that they need to work with the private rented sector, not actually alienate them. And that's why they've asked me to help advise on what's the reality for the landlord. So I go along representing landlords and agents and saying what the challenges you face and us face as letting agents, and how we can work together. So
there's no such thing anymore as the rent tribunal?
Not in the format as it's been years ago, no. There has been talk about in London about sort of capping rents and things like that. Boris Johnson's a bit on a sort of a thing about that at the moment, unfortunately. However, the problem you've got is that to actually roll that out and enforce that would take a massive big legislation to do that. So that would actually suppress the market rather than actually grow the market, and it needs to grow to be able to house, because what we've also experienced in the last 5 years, there hasn't been house building. There's a lag of 5 years worth of house building, and they're trying to pay catch up. It's going to take quite a number of years to catch up, and there's still not enough land to actually accommodate all the building that is required as such. So hence why people are rented and things. Well, thank you very much for coming. And like I say, if anybody didn't feel comfortable about sort of asking in an open environment, feel free to. There's plenty of us. We've got a estate agency. You've got Stacey, myself, letting agents in the room. So if you've got a specific question that you just wanted to do on one-on-one, we're quite happy to stay behind and answer those for you. But thank you very much for your time, and hope you found it useful. Okay, thank you.